There's something important bothering you in your work or in your life that you really want to go in and fix. Every time you see it, it could be something big or small, you want to go in and change it, but you haven't gotten around to it yet. Or maybe something's stopping you, but that's about to change. You're about to meet the one and only Scott Westfahl, a dear friend and mentor of mine. His work has been pivotal in teaching me to believe in myself enough to go after the things that need changing, even when the people around me might not fully understand why I'm doing it or what I'm going after. It's Scott's belief in me, perhaps before I even believed in myself, over 10 years ago, that's the reason we're sitting here today. Scott Westfahl is a world renowned leadership expert. He is a professor at Harvard Law School. He's a faculty director at Harvard Law School Executive Education. He's one of the most sought after voices on leadership for lawyers in the world. And he spends his days with the world's most influential leaders in law. Scott Westfahl, welcome to Soul Toll.
Wow, what an introduction. I'm kind of misty already here. And to be clear, I said earlier when we first got together, I consider you a mentor of mine too. You're fearless, you're courageous, you're visionary, and it's really an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that so much. So, just to start us off, I know how busy you are and how much teaching you have around the world. I know you had a class this morning, you have a class this afternoon. Why did you say yes to join us on Soul Toll today?
I am always looking for new platforms and new ways to engage with people. And one of the reasons I loved working with you when we worked together was that you were always finding new platforms and new ideas. So anytime you've asked, I've always said yes.
It's true, you
And I've
have.
never been in this kind of a studio before being in such a great place here live from Marblehead, Massachusetts. And I am really thrilled. So it was an easy thing to say yes to. I also know that you're really wonderful at um, thoughtful, insightful conversation. And every time we've had the opportunity to speak, it feels like no time passes. So it's always fun too.
Thank you. So, you have taught me so much in my life and career. And I think as people starting out in their careers, they're always looking up for people they want to emulate, who they respect. And you always stood out in my mind as someone who had conviction about what you were doing. And I think, people finding purpose in their careers, it's a really big, overwhelming word. But sometimes it can just look like standing up for yourself, going after things in smaller ways that you believe in. Um, and so I'm wondering, of everything that you're teaching your students about how to stay anchored, about their conviction. And when I say students, I mean younger students and also the most seasoned executives in the world. I know you work with both and across people over the entire arc of their career. How do they stay anchored? And if someone is to listen to this whole episode today, what will they walk away with? What could change in their life?
You know, when I'm talking about these issues, one of the most important mental switches that I'm trying to affect in the legal profession has to do with the nature of the people who opt in to be lawyers. And this isn't unique to lawyers necessarily, but it's the community with whom I'm working most often. What happens is we are captive to this need for achievement and milestone after milestone from an early age. We're looking at extrinsic metrics, extrinsic rewards, and we get captive to that in a way that we can easily lose sight of what really actually matters to us. In the law school world, there's a flip that happens. Studies about law student depression, for example, show that law students enter law school with the same relative rate and possibility of mental health issues as other graduate students, but by the time they graduate, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to have been through depression.
Oh,
The correlating factor tends to be they lose sight of their inner purpose and compass, and they start letting extrinsic metrics really define them. In the competitive environment of law school, they're worried about their grades and which law firms gave them offers, all of the extrinsic measures of success. Did they get a clerkship? Did they make law review? And as they enter then, the legal profession, they're already kind of captive by this achievement, motivation, and they've let other people define success for them. And
Mhm.
so there aren't those moments. We also tend in law school to so overwork them, especially first year at our law school, that there isn't time for them to step back and be reflecting of others. Worse, in the classroom, we're teaching them to always put the client first
Mhm.
and to put their own personal beliefs and sense of self aside, because the model of lawyering, at least what we teach typically first year, is this: you have to advocate any viewpoint from
Mhm.
possible within a case or a matter, and you lose sight of your own viewpoint within that framework, because we so overload them, and we typically teach in the first year of law school without any sense of connection to how lawyers make a positive difference in the world. They're reading appellate judicial decisions. They're never actually talking about what lawyers do until they hit second and third year and get in clinics and things like that. They're not even exposed to positive visions of lawyering.
Right.
And by that time, they're kind of jaded,
Mhm.
and have entered, the spiral, I think, that takes out their sense of reflection. So I say, law students, lawyers are the least self-reflective of professionals, and the key to staying anchored in your own sense of connectivity, higher purpose, and meaning is reflection.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Law is almost the extreme for everyone else to learn from
Yeah,
in
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's, again, it's at the outer edge of that dynamic, but across our world, we're losing opportunities. I think the challenge is that we have, especially in American society, but now it's spreading around the world too, is we're defining the goal of human existence as maximizing productivity and
Exactly.
efficiency and doing things better, faster, working harder, and living to work.
Yeah, talk to me more about that because that's part of the reason we're here is that so many other podcasts are productivity, how to squeeze
Right.
65 minutes out of an
Yeah.
hour, and you can lose yourself by doing that because you're just all of a sudden doing and on autopilot, and so there's no pause for reflection. Like, how do you see that coming up
Yeah.
in your work and what you do?
I'm, the programs that I'm running for the executive leadership programs offer this opportunity to pause and reflect. And over 12 and a half years now running those programs, it's been so wonderful to see how many lawyers go through these breakthrough moments. It's the first time in 20 or 30 years when they've taken a week just to, learn something new about leadership, but also reflect upon where they are in their own lives and build a sense of community. And it's been amazing to watch these um, breakthrough insights over time. Right after the pandemic, there was a book that came out, and I've been sending it around to people, called 4,000 Weeks. And the title's interesting. 4,000 Weeks is actually an 80-year lifespan. And I'm actually now in, like, I don't know, week 3,000 plus, and I'm looking
Mhm.
ahead in my life. Like, how do you, when you put a number on it and you realize there's a finite amount of time we have here, and there's an infinite number of things we can do, the book's purpose is to have us step back and say, wait a minute, let me choose a few things and do that are meaningful, and do those things and let go of the rest. The fear of missing out, the fear of letting go, the drive towards greater and greater efficiency. It challenges our relationship to time, which I think is really interesting too. He says, Oliver Berkman is the wonderful author. I got to meet him once. He's such a nice man. Says that before the Industrial Revolution, we didn't quantify time and link it to, purpose and productivity. So I wouldn't have asked you, how did you spend your day? That literally
Mm.
wasn't part of the English language. I wouldn't have said we're wasting time, or time is money. All of those things that have now gotten in our head about maximizing efficiency um, get in the way of us understanding that, again, there's an unlimited number of things to do. We have to pick a few and do them well. When I'm teaching about this, sometimes I tell a story about my dad. My dad was a nuclear submarine captain in the Cold War, very, serious guy. He had two younger brothers, and um, we didn't spend a lot of time with them because we moved military base to military base. But when my Uncle Lynn passed away, he was 56 years old and he died of heart disease. He was a very large man and he smoked and drank, and that didn't help. And he passed away. And I went to the funeral in Milwaukee where my dad grew up, and with my dad. And I remember that day as a beautiful day of reflection. And even though it was so sad, he showed me the grave of my grandparents. We went to his old high school in his old neighborhood. He told me a lot of stories. 2 years later, his other brother, my Uncle David, died also at 56, also of heart disease. And I went to the funeral, but in the interim, my dad had become a leading corporate executive at a major company, and they had given him this thing called a Blackberry.
Mm.
And it was the exact opposite. We spent that day with my dad constantly looking and constantly sending messages. He wasn't taking the time to live in his grief and think about his brother. And it just reminded me that it's so tempting and easy for us in the world of devices and connectivity to lose sense of what's right in front of us and what matters. And um, again, how we step back to do that in a world that's especially metric driven and
Hmm.
extrinsically focused becomes really a challenge. We have to own that ourselves.
What a beautiful story. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that,
Yes.
and the amazing contrast
Yeah.
that you're able to see through the
It was literally
juxtaposition
like the
of it.
best day I ever had with my dad and one of the worst days.
Wow.
Yeah.
The difference was being there
Yeah.
and not being
How do
there.
you be present?
Hmm.
And again, there's so many things that pull us aside from presence. My latest teaching has been at the intersection of spirituality and leadership. Small s spirituality, meaning spiritual practices. If religion may or may not be a part of spirituality for some people, um, but this idea of recognizing the sense of connectivity to other people and a sense of higher meaning and purpose in your life. And there's ways that we can access that. They're now doing all of this interesting neuroscience research at Columbia and other places, reading MRI brain scans and seeing that when I'm engaged in meditation or spending time in nature or giving back to others and being in community, it's activating what Dr. Lisa Miller from Columbia is calling the awakened part of my brain that is in touch with the sense of connectivity to others and a sense of higher purpose and meaning. She says we have an achieving brain that gets things done and is
Hmm.
focused on productivity and all those extrinsic
It's lit up
metrics.
all the time, perhaps.
Gotcha. And especially with lawyers. And then we've got the awakened part of our brain when we step back. I love that fact that she sees that we need both. And her great analogy, now that the World Cup is coming up, is playing soccer. Um, you need your achieving brain to kick the ball down the field.
Hmm.
The awakened part of our brain is what notices other players, patterns of play, and might ask the question, is this game worth playing? We're
Hmm.
stepping back from that. And you need both and that integration
Yeah.
to chart your course through life. You have to be practical and get things done, but you also have to make sure you're doing the things that matter.
Yeah, I'm curious about this integration of
Yeah.
approaches and disciplines because it sounds like even more so from when we worked together 10 years ago,
Yeah.
spirituality and leadership, with law, with, with neuroscience, all of these different pieces are coming together. It sounds like in new ways that are needed.
I think so, and I like the fact that it's science-based. It's very hard to teach anything for lawyers if there's not research and fact and science-based.
Yes,
And this is
absolutely.
not, and I'm not, this is, the teaching is not wellness teaching, and so it's a different thing. Mindfulness is all, and meditation practices are really important also to teach about intrinsically for different reasons. I'm specifically looking at it, and Harvard Business School is the newest course at Harvard Business School, is called the Spiritual Lives of Leaders, and it's a joint venture with the
It's
Divinity
amazing.
School. And the idea is, how do you, as a leader, an executive, or a lawyer within a company or outside counsel, make better, more ethical decisions
Hmm.
that are centered in what's right for the long term of the organization and sustainability, not the short term focus on quarterly earnings that can get you in a lot of trouble. We have very
Hmm.
specific case examples that we teach about in our leadership programs where um, For example, at General Motors, there was a big recall crisis years ago, and the legal department was found to be very complicit in it. Lawyers within the General Motors legal department were seeing their jobs as minimizing short-term financial risk to the company. In a way, they were complicit in covering up, 10 years of a product, a faulty ignition switch that led to over 100 people dying, and lots of grief and trauma in people's lives. The lawyers didn't see that, weren't stepping back from that issue and saying, what's my actual role here? From a financial standpoint, there's estimates I've seen that it cost GM $10 billion worth of value in
Yeah.
the long run.
Yeah.
But
They were doing a cost benefit analysis,
yeah,
not a soul toll analysis.
exactly right. No, and it was really, really difficult. You get captured by the system you're in. When do you step back and recognize that sense of higher connectivity and purpose? And I think in the world of Gen AI, I think I'm more and more concerned about it because we're not going to be able to regulate Gen AI, and it's going to move much faster than regulatory schemes come into play. Therefore, the people in the system who have the ability to think analytically and from different perspectives and step back and can question the philosophical underpinnings of all of it. Typically, those are the lawyers. The people with legal training have the
Right.
best capacity to do that in those companies and those systems. And I'm hoping that these practices of staying anchored can help them do that and to figure out how can I be asking the questions that really matter.
Yeah, and as AI comes into everything, your leadership training has never been more critical. But when you started out, a lot of leadership training, especially for lawyers,
Yeah.
that was a bit of an uphill battle, but you had your conviction. So I'm curious, you were talking about staying anchored and having
Yeah.
conviction and how some of that can be kind of stripped away or you're pressured to go in a different direction early on. How did you
Yeah, that's
maintain your
interesting.
conviction?
I practiced law for 10 years, and it literally almost broke my heart and um, uh, sent me into a deep spiral at one point that I climbed out of. And that memory strengthens me. Then I went over to the consulting world. I saw a very different way of working and a different emphasis on leadership. And it helped very much that um, I had a model that was successful from somewhere else. And when I got back to the law, I had seen things that worked in a different paradigm. So I was strengthened by
Mhm.
that. But I think I've always approached the systems I'm in through a lens of empathy. And I think that really helps. I teach now about adaptive leadership, which is a model from our Kennedy School of Government that's anchored on moving people through change in a way that's just rooted in understanding. If I'm going to ask them to change, I have to first understand who are all the stakeholders here? What are they afraid of losing? What are they holding on to? I'm asking them to change deeply held values, ways of working. I can't just come in and out advocate them about why this is great for them, or they're going to
Mhm.
get resistant and they're going to think you have no idea what my life is like.
Mhm.
Staying anchored and staying in that empathetic conversation with them is what eventually helps move them forward. Ron Heifetz from our Kennedy School says leadership is disappointing people at a pace they can handle,
Mm.
which I think is a really powerful way to think about that. I'm empathizing, I'm listening, I understand my vision for what's possible is way over here, but to get them there, I've got to move at the right pace. Um, I have to stay true to and stay anchored in my own convictions. It's not easy work. It's a zigzag. We make a couple of
Yeah.
steps forward, and then there's a backlash and a side direction. It's also not a solo sport. I think one of the things that's really important in that model and in the teaching I'm doing now for my law students is a lot of times, they take all of the weight on their own shoulders. So
Mhm.
the class I'm teaching on adaptive leadership for law students right now, they start the semester and they have to describe a time when they failed, they were trying to lead change
But
within
they've
some
never failed.
system. Well, this is the thing.
Yeah.
They don't want to say it. And they'll say, Professor, well, I didn't really fail. I just tried something and it didn't really work the way I wanted. I'm like, that's, we
Mhm.
can call it a failure. Okay. And we're allergic to the word failure in the law, but then we move forward. And a lot of their stories are they're a junior person in an organization and they're trying to create change and it doesn't work. And um, when we start to approach the system with the adaptive lens, thinking, who are all the stakeholders you didn't engage with here? Who could have been your potential allies? Why were you taking this all on your own shoulders?
Mhm.
That weight was too heavy, especially for where you were situated in the organization. We say leadership is an activity. It's not a role or a title, and you can lead from any level. But if you're going to lead from a junior position in an organization, again, stages of careers, as I think about this, how do you start approaching with empathy and listening and engaging, understanding the system you're in before trying to change it? I tell law students, if you're going to try to change Harvard Law School, going to the dean with a petition and a list of demands is
Not the way
not
to
going
do
to
it.
work, and it's lazy.
Yeah.
You haven't done any of the work to understand why the system is the way it is
Yes.
and empathize with who are
It's
the
very long-standing established
yeah.
system that you've just come into and
And you
need to
just
spend time. Yeah.
yeah, you want to rock it, change it. I got it. It probably does need to change,
Mhm.
but you have to have some empathy and curiosity about why is it set up the way it is. And if I'm going to ask someone to do something differently and move very traditional faculty in a different direction, for example, I've got to approach what that means for them and what they're afraid of losing, giving up, protecting, and convince them that not everything's changing. There's a whole
Mhm.
set of core things that aren't changing. We're going to change a little bit of our DNA here, and we're going to adapt to the new climate and environment that we're in. That's evolutionary biology is the
Mhm.
example.
This is so hard though, because I love this example because they're coming in saying, I want to change this thing. I'm anchored, I have my purpose, I have conviction. And
Yeah.
so here you go. These are the things I did the research. These are the things that are going to be great. And then having it not received, I think that's where people get worn down and worn down and worn down of, well, but I'm trying to follow my purpose. I'm trying to have
Yeah.
conviction, but I just keep, banging my head against the wall. And so maybe I should go do something else. What would you say to that
Yeah.
person?
Well, typically in those stories, what's happened is the person who's saying no to whatever they want to change becomes the villain. And they target that, that group of administrators or that person, that boss I had is the villain. They do nothing to understand what are the pressures on that person
Mhm.
and where are they coming from? What are those person's values? They really haven't done any of the work to understand the sources of resistance or the potential allies you might cultivate to whom that person might listen more than they would listen to you as a junior person. Instead, they just it's egocentric and rewarding to say that's just the villain and I'm opting out of this and leaving.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't sometimes it does make sense to leave if a system isn't aligned with your values and it's not going to move at the pace you want to. That's just fine too. A few weeks ago in my class, I had as a guest my former student Rachel Cohen, who made a lot of headlines when her law firm was considering making a deal with the Trump administration around DEI related things. And she submitted a conditional resignation and she lost her job that
Oh,
day.
wow.
And she came back as a guest in my class and we were, unpacking, how does she make that decision to put everything at risk? What other potential avenues might there have been? What I'm trying to hope is that we can, again, stay anchored in our conviction, look for other possibilities to move people and systems forward. It may not be at the pace we want, but it's more sustainable. One of the things that happens, and we're seeing this right now with the political backlash on a lot of different issues, is one political side gets way out in front of the other.
Mhm.
And they didn't change people's hearts, minds, loyalties, or explain things. They just imposed new, boundaries, rules, constrictions, and there's building resentment because people weren't brought along to as to why that was going to be good for them or
Heard their
important
voice heard,
to
not
have
just
their
brought along.
voice heard and
Yeah.
empathized with.
Mhm.
And instead it was imposed, and those things fail. Most revolutions fail. They're not sustainable. I think for us to move forward, as a country, there's no doubt in my mind that we have to be not talking at each other, but listening to each other and finding common ground and understanding sources of difference, um, and potential ways to move forward.
Hmm.
And that's just not happening. So, um, years ago, when, back to the anchor of what I'm trying to teach, I wrote a law review article in Stanford Law Review art with my mentor and hero, David Wilkins, my favorite professor from when I was a law student, about lawyer development. And we posed that it's a triangle of legal technical skills and knowledge that law schools and law firms have always taught really well, networks that lawyers don't really focus on,
Hmm.
but business people know really well is a great way to solve problems, having interdisciplinary
Oh,
network.
absolutely. I've read and studied this article, by the way.
Yeah.
And the networks, my favorite explanation of it is, oh, I can call a person.
Yeah.
I know who to call.
Yeah.
It's the best superpower there is.
Absolutely. And you're really great at it. You're a great example of someone who networks beautifully and wonderfully. But in law school, we don't train people in any of those skills. The leadership and professional skills is the third leg of that triangle. And we're underemphasizing those in legal education, which is again the purpose and meaning of what I'm doing. Gen AI is going to replace much more quickly the technical legal skills and knowledge. The application of a legal framework to a set of facts, it's already
I
doing
was going
really
to say,
well.
what do you think the timeline is?
It's very, very fast.
Yeah.
It's in a lot of ways, it's there
Yeah.
in different functions. And it's, I spoke at orientation for all of the Harvard first year law students back in August. And I confidently said that I was the first professor speaking to them in their first week of law school who could not predict what the practice of law will look like when they graduate. And law has been a very slowly evolving profession, and it's always been really easy to tell them what it was going to be like. I do not know.
Yeah.
But I do know that emphasizing the human skills that AI won't replace as quickly are really important. And those empathy, listening, curiosity, teamwork, respectful discussions, navigating differences, human centered design approaches, leveraging networks that AI can't replace easily. All of that's really important. And traditional legal education is very individualistic. I'm learning the legal framework and I'm proving on my exams
Right.
how well I can do at applying those to a set of facts and issue spotting. And that's exactly what AI does.
Right.
Like I don't know.
Can't make up a better.
And the best lawyers have a
framework,
lot
yeah.
of other skills that they've developed over time. We just need to be more intentional about teaching them. It's funny, sometimes you write a law review article and you're wondering, is this going to be relevant 10 years from now? I think it's even more relevant than before. I ran into one managing partner of a law firm and told me a story. She wrote a law review article way back when that's become one of the most but-see opposite cited articles of all time.
Funny. Yeah.
Because she
Will you explain to the listeners what that means? They might not know.
So her article is cited as a negative example of a prediction more frequently than almost any other law review article because she predicted that lawyers being risk averse would never use email. And she was
But see, yeah.
so there it is. And
That's great.
But I think our framework holds, and I think that this again, with the political uncertainty and economic uncertainty we're under, with Gen AI evolving in an incredibly rapid way that where we have to be answering existential questions about what we're doing with it. Is the purpose of human existence to maximize productivity and efficiency? That's what AI is being aimed
I
at.
hope not.
And how do we step back from that?
Yeah.
Right? Because there are definitely there have been some scary articles lately saying there's a component of the Gen AI developers who really believe robots should just replace us anyways, and mankind doesn't need to exist. And I'm not there.
No, yeah.
And I, am tempted
We're
to.
disappointing you one step at a time.
Yeah, it's just a little too far for that.
Yeah.
I think there's something beautiful about human connection and creativity. I have a friend who's an author, a novelist, and we were having a discussion about AI 2 years ago. And I thought, well, I wonder if I go into a bookstore, am I going to be seeing a gold seal on a novel that promises me it was 100% written by a human being?
Mhm.
She texted me a couple of weeks ago that the Writers Guild has come up with that gold
Oh,
seal and
that's
it now
wonderful.
exists. She's like,
Yeah.
didn't you predict this? And yeah. And I wonder, right? So I hope Soul Toll has a stamp on
As a
that.
good one. It should. I might get one.
Yeah, 'cause I know you, I'm sure you wrote it from
I
the
wrote it
heart.
before Gen AI,
Exactly,
so
right.
I'm good. Yeah.
Exactly. And maybe a book written by AI is a good read. There's something deeper that I'm feeling maybe as this the last generation who remembers a pre-digital world.
Hmm.
A sense of loss there that somehow I feel is very valid. That the purpose of life and where I've tried to anchor my work is actually in, community, love, caring, and concern for other human beings. And I don't think AI large language models are going to achieve that in a way that is inspiring in any way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And so you told a room full of successful already 20-year-olds that you didn't
yeah,
know how AI was going to change the future of their
yeah,
careers, but you do know, and I think that this is going to be a through line that sustains what the different inflection points are over their career from,
yeah,
starting out to mid to seasoned to 3,000 weeks.
yeah.
Um,
4.
well, no,
I'm already
so
over
far,
3.
yeah.
Okay, okay, sorry.
Yes, you have
Scared.
3,000 weeks.
Thank you.
When you're
Don't take my weeks. Yeah.
That's very
I need
funny.
them.
Um, but there are things that they will experience as
Yeah,
humans amidst AI. So what are those kind of thoughts
yeah,
that you could tell them? Okay, I don't know what your career is going to look like,
right.
but I do know some of the experiences and mindsets you're going to have as you walk through life. And here are some ways to stay anchored at those three inflection points
Yeah.
as starting out, mid, and then more seasoned. What would you say?
Starting out, there's this huge temptation to let the system define your goals and values. And again, I do appreciate that the students I'm teaching have the privilege of, finding really good, high paying jobs. Not everybody has that. Some people go to work because they really just have to pay the bills, and work is a component of their life. Um, the professionals I'm working with tend to work so much that work is really the dominant source of activity for them, and they don't unplug and they don't take much time off. So how do you try in the beginning at least to align with things that feel more right than wrong to you,
Hmm.
finding a job that doesn't feel like work because it's aligned with who you are? It doesn't come in the first job typically.
Hmm.
And I
You're very
appreciate
lucky
that
if it
too.
does. Yeah.
Very lucky if it does, but remembering and having people who hold you to account for that sense of what matters to you. When I teach about networks, I reference work by Rob Cross, a great professor who studied the networks of high performing people. Uh,
Babson. He's from
He was
Babson.
at
Yeah.
Babson. I think he's now moving into retirement. He's just a wonderful human being. And he had a network mapping exercise where part of it was the professional network, where do you get information, who's sponsoring and mentoring you, who creates opportunities. The personal side he found was just as important. Who holds you to account? Who's there for you when you've had a really tough day and you can lean on? Um, who holds you to account for the things that feed your soul was one way he worded it. And that was really interesting. And when I thought about it, my best friend and I are really different people. He didn't go to college. He's worked in design and construction industries and things, but we owned a sailboat together years ago. We share a lot of core values because our dads were both at the Naval Academy at the same time. Um, he would call me up when I was a busy lawyer and says, "You're working too hard. When was the last time you were out on the boat? We got to go scuba diving." Like bringing me back to the sense of reality. Who do you have in your life that calls you back to that?
I love
Those
that.
other things that matter. And how do you build community in a way that reinforces that when everything is tugging you? So early on in careers, I think that's really important. At the mid level, I talk about two curves to measure. Okay, you've had your initial jobs where you built a skill set, you're gaining more agency and being able to pick the kind of work you want to do. Two curves. One, what is your learning curve? Are you continuing to learn and grow? across things that you're really interested in. How are you growing as a person and as a professional? The other is impact curve. Are you are you building your impact on things that matter to you, or is that curve flat or going down? And in a job, it's really important to realize that those matter. I had been at my job in consulting for about 5 years when I was out with some of the consultants who were all MBAs, and they're much more deliberate than lawyers are. Lawyers, we tend to get trapped within the system. We want to deliver, we want to please, we'll do whatever it takes, and we don't pull our head out of the sand. My head was totally in the sand, and they're like, "How long have you been here?" I said, "5 years." They're like, "Well, haven't you learned everything you're going to learn?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, no." And what kind of impact is your impact increasing? And I loved my job, but they were right. Both of those curves had flattened
Mm,
out, and then it was time to leave. So thinking
interesting.
about that, but where are those reflection moments when you're thinking, wait a minute, am I actually having impact on things that matter to me? Am I continuing to learn and grow? I was very fortunate because the asking those questions put me on a different path. And now 12 and a half years into my job at the law school, my learning curve goes up every day. My impact curve seems to be going up and more global all the time. And opportunities like this are yet another platform to be on. So I'm like a little kid in the candy store, and I walk to work pinching myself like I get to do this today. Yay. It's sometimes it's exhausting because I try to give a lot of myself in all my teaching, but it's really those moments. I had another quick story. A senior partner at a law firm. We're moving on to the senior part of our
Hmm.
careers, like this really important senior partners and are ones who've typically just they're super successful. They've made a lot of money. There are a lot of people counting on them to bring in work and keep them working and busy. It makes it even harder for them to step back and remember the things that matter. Your ego gets invested, your identity gets so closely locked with your work. And separating self from role becomes really, really important. Deloitte actually did a study, I think it was Deloitte. They had mandatory retirement age at 65, and they were shocked at how many people had died within 5 years of that mandatory retirement age because they hadn't separated self from role. So managing partners of a law firm is in my program, senior partner, and he has a great experience. He goes away. This was in May. By September, he's emailing me saying, by the way, my wife and I are coming to Boston. I'd love her to show the law school. Could we drop by for a quick tour? So I said, absolutely, it'd be great to see you. He comes, his wife is lovely. They're holding hands the whole time. They're really
Oh,
cute. But she goes off to look at something at one point, and he pulls me aside. I have to tell you quickly, your course really made a difference for me. On the last day of the course, you challenged us to step back and think about what really matters. And we had discussions about that in small groups, and that made such a difference. You didn't know this, but I was separated from my wife at the time. And that
I
night I went
know.
back to my hotel room and I called her and I said, I did everything wrong. I was a complete jerk. Could we try again? And they were in Boston on their second honeymoon. And I
Oh,
was just
wow.
like, it was like one of those things like I don't have to teach anything
I
else
know.
this year.
Good job this time.
It's like, those are the moments, right?
That's
And how do you
amazing.
provide these forums where at that senior level with so many people, clients and people internal to his firm, counting on him every single day. He had just lost sight of what mattered in his own life and didn't separate self from role. And it was really great to be able to see that breakthrough.
Yeah. Then, he probably didn't know that he needed that until
No,
he got there. And
no.
that's what's so hard to figure out too, is like, how do you prompt people to have this reflection if they don't already have a practice for it?
Yeah, and it's really difficult because, again, that mindset of putting others first, always putting the client first, is so deeply ingrained by that point. Um, the way that we've tried to do it at the Harvard Law School executive education programs, we have an advantage that our brand attracts people in. I'm like, well,
Hmm.
that's not just a well-being
I
program. It must be
remember
something really good.
you call it convening power. I always remember that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a convening power. When we teach in a fact case-based manner that assures them that we actually do understand how hard their lives are, that we're trying to make them more effective in their daily work, as well as take a step back to think about higher meaning and purpose. So there's a combination of those things, and it tends to work. The word has spread through word of mouth and others. it would be wonderful to try to scale this more effectively. The reason I also teach for our law students, I have a class every January for 65 first year law students. I'm teaching them right away about here's what might happen and
Hmm.
here are the things you need to look out for, and I'm putting them in small groups to get and working in teams across the 3 weeks of that course so that they can be vulnerable with each other and open up and be ready for that. I think a lot of times, business executives, lawyers, have a hard time being vulnerable and asking for help and asking for advice, and that's the biggest trap.
Absolutely. I remember I can do it myself and
Yeah,
being very stuck on that.
yeah,
So for our listeners who,
yeah.
listen to this conversation today on staying anchored, what's one thing that you would advise they could either start doing or stop doing? We talked a lot today about
Yeah,
productivity and how we're all already doing too much.
right.
So either or, what would you
And
advise?
it's kind of the combination we've been talking this whole time about. How do you step back from time to time? Can you build in a regular practice of reflection, whether it's a short walk every day, whether it's uh, making sure that you have a community with whom you're sharing um, those reflection moments can be so critical, and they build upon each other. It's just starting the small habit of it becomes really powerful. I started doing yoga before the pandemic. I was dating someone, she brought me to a yoga studio, pandemic hits. I started doing it on an app, and then it sort of caught on in my life, and now I use at least 5 minutes of it as reflection, kind of meditation slash prayer every time I do it. And I've only missed 4 days in 3 years, I think. It's now become I never would have thought I was that person, but it's making me so much more calm and centered. I use that time to be grateful for the things around me, to realize where I can do better as a person, to ask for grace, and to ask for grace and help for others in my life. And that's just been super, super helpful in pulling me back from the stresses that we're all under. And my job is also stressful. I don't want to pretend it's a perfect job. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of struggle, the headwinds, and people who are resistant to the teaching and the learning. That's fine. I'm just meeting them with a lot more grace and empathy than I used to. And I'm much more anchored in the center, and I think that's where I would start. And the stop is just stop letting other people define what success means for you.
Hmm, that's freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
It absolutely is. So, what are your parting words, your lasting gift for the people who have spent time with
Mhm.
us today? What would
Yeah.
you say?
I think having grace for yourself and giving yourself that gift of reflection is really, really important. And not seeing it as a selfish act, especially for the lawyers with whom I work. They see taking time for themselves as selfish, or thinking about their own perspective and self care as selfish. And it just isn't. You can't help others without having grace for yourself, empathy for yourself, and taking care of yourself. And it's just, it won't get you there otherwise.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much. And for the listeners, please take the time to build in reflection. And the thing to stop doing is to stop letting external metrics of success define you, and tap back into your inner compass, and feel anchored to feel freer in your life. So thank you so much for being
Thank
here,
you.
Scott.
It's such a pleasure.
Please share this someone with someone who needs it, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.